Welcome to How We Survive, our launch. Before we do anything else, I would very much like to invite Councillor Yvonne Weldon for an acknowledgement of country.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, sisters and brothers, all genders and identities. My name is Yvonne Weldon. I am a Wiradjuri woman from Cowra here in New South Wales, from the waters of the Clare, which later became known as the Lachlan, and of the Murrumbidgee rivers. Where we're gathered is such an important part of this country. The impact took place here, and there's so much more about what we need to discuss, sometimes in a healthy way, and others a bit of a challenge. And some of that challenges is that unfortunately there aren't any people that have proven traditional owners of these lands, because this is where the first impact took place. And so I am a representative of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, who are caretakers with Culture Authority under the Aboriginal Land Rights Act. I would like to pay my respects to all elders past and present, to all First Nations, to you and the ancestors of the lands that you've travelled from. Some people have views about welcomes to country and whether they need to be done. There is so much across this continent that isn't known, isn't respected, and this further dispossesses the First Nations. I thank you for including me, the First Nations, and all of us. We can achieve so much more when we do so together. A welcome to country is more than just words or something you tick off on. It is a spiritual process. By honouring the ancestors' footsteps, we are all walking in, continuing the practice of the many generations before us to the many generations to come, where the sharing and the trading of our resources, our knowledge and our traditions has been my people's way of life since time began. We traded and shared amongst the nations, tribes and clans existing here for over 65,000 years, traded for necessity and not for empires. The boundaries of our traditional owners are not defined by the hand or by the pen, but through the natural landscapes of the earth. The Eora Nation's country covers the Hawkes River in the north, the Nepean in the west, and the Georges River in the south. On behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, the elders and the members, I welcome everyone to the lands of the Gadigal. I acknowledge Gadigal people whose spirits and ancestors will always remain with this land, our Mother Earth. As you are gathered here today, let us all remember and acknowledge the many warriors that have created pathways for all of us, the ones recognised and those we've never heard of. Our songlines and our customs have sustained us, and they're embedded into the core of this nation. In fact, it is the core of each and every one of us. My people are the oldest continuously living culture of the world. And the challenges that we're all faced with today is not the same as it was in the last few years or so. The cycle doesn't only change because of policy or legislation. It cannot always be about data and the bottom line. Our lived experience must be included as well. Human life and people's opportunity, or lack thereof, cannot be rationalised to balance what will never be equal. Utilise your learnings to help others along the way. There are people that are either in your workplace, in your family, in your neighbourhoods, that are making a difference, or perhaps are even struggling. We all need to make sure that we are helping others, to make sure we are sharing along our journey. Use your passion and your commitment to make positive change that is so needed. As you connect, learn and share, today, tomorrow and beyond, bring my people, your people and all our people together. All of us can make positive change for each other, the world around us, now and into the future. That will become the milestones of our future. All our futures are a collective one, so we can have one. Resilience and response to recover, all are important, but it's the prevention, care and compassion that sometimes goes unnoticed. You too can make a difference long before any devastating disaster takes place. Be the healing before any trauma. So let us all draw upon my people's spirits as we continue on our journey. May my people's spirits walk with you and guide you as we strive forward for us all. Again, on behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, Ninyini, Nala, Wongan, Mari, Bajari, Gadi, Nurda, welcome to Gadigal country. This always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, Yvonne Weldon. Thank you. Thank you for those. They're real words, they're genuine, we believe them and we support them. So thank you very much for taking time to join us, and please stay with us as long as you can today. My name is David Sanderson from the University of New South Wales, and it's my utter privilege to be the MC for this, and also to talk a little bit around this long-term independently funded initiative we're kicking off, How We Survive. We'll tell you about that. We also want it to be a relaxed day, and not informal because we got stuff planned, but you know, not business as usual. We've got an amazing venue. Thank you to our hosts for putting this on, and I've got lots of thank yous. There are lots of people to welcome in the room. And we'll do that more informally over drinks and stuff like that. But I just want to say thank you very much for our delegation from Canada, for Janelle Saffin, MP member for Lismore, Parliamentary Secretary for Disaster Recovery, for bringing along a delegation from Canada. Thank you. My wife's Canadian, so she's over the moon about that, of course, so thank you. And that's Sean Tupper, Deputy Minister, Office of Public Safety, and Trevor Bupsing, Assistant Deputy Minister. Thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you all for being with us. I didn't want to make it too formal today. I say it is formal, but it's also relaxed. And I had my PowerPoint, and I thought I would instead use this. It was Father's Day yesterday. My wife and daughter gave me this, and it's got Net Loft written on the front. And there's just something nice about rewriting those notes in a way that is serious, because it's a serious subject we're talking about, but not too rigid. Okay, so we've planned stuff. If things change, that doesn't matter. You know, all that kind of thing. We want our tonality of How We Survive to be different and to be like that. On the formal side, I should say, there are fire exits. You can see all those things. And there are bathrooms all over the place. You've seen them over there and also over there as well. So for those who need those, me in particular, that's very useful. In terms of today, I'm going to talk a little bit around the background. You won't be surprised to hear that, I hope, around How We Survive. Just a few minutes. I won't kill you through PowerPoint, I promise. It's no more than 5 or 6 images, that's it. We're very PowerPoint light today. PowerPoint light? No? Yes. Okay, we're PowerPointy, so that's okay. So I'm going to talk a bit, hand over to my colleagues, Lisa, who will hand over to Tim, who will hand over to Kate, to talk about just the summaries of our starting points. Today is about starting points. We don't have a grand plan of being here. We have a vision thing, the vision thing to do that, but it's not must be like this, all right? It's very much a way of doing it that we're choosing to do. Then we'll do a Q&A. We have very nice chairs here. Thank you, Natalie. Then we'll take a break. And then we have this life raft event in the afternoon that Kate's hosting. Serious subject. I'm going to say done in a light way, but in a way that explores, in a way that we'll tacitly agree is okay to do that. Nothing funny. That's not what I'm saying. But we'll find a way to explore issues like that, and we're grateful for our panel who are joining us, our life rafters, I suppose, our life rafters who are going to be on the life raft. And then we'll aim to finish 4:15, something like that. We have the room for a couple of hours, and there are drinks and nibbles, alcohol-free, alcoholic, the rest. So, you know, we all do lots of these things, I'm sure, so we've given over a lot of time to get to know each other and chat, which is also very much the tonality, if you like, of How We Survive. Is that okay? Is it comfortable? Any loose ends? Bathrooms? Stuff? Exits? Great. There's a view of the harbour. It's amazing. All right. Okay. Well, I just want to talk and say just a few minutes about the background. And you know what's coming now, colleagues. 3 weeks ago, we had a sort of a run-through of what we would present. And I did a brilliant lecture. It was incredible. It was fabulous. All my colleagues said it was amazing. It was really well thought through. And they also said it really was very boring. It's really boring, we know that, get to the point. But they also said, and this sits a bit uncomfortably, to talk about personal stuff, stories. So I put together just 2 or 3 stories. I promise you that they're all true, they're not made up. Just a few minutes, and I think it's a valid point. We want to do it differently, so I'm grateful. Actually, Tim, you said you hated my talk, so it's not really, you know, you sacked, but that's okay. All right, so yeah, so at the same time talking about this is a true story. I'm sure a lot of us have these, one key photo. And I took a photo, I was 25, 1991, and it was a low-income settlement, a slum in Delhi in India. And it was nothing unusual. Hundreds of millions of people live around the world in low-income settlements. We know that. Subject to floods, to fires, no healthcare, no insurance, no stuff, or, you know, all those things, the usual story. I don't mean that lightly. I mean it's not unusual. And then at the back of the image, some distance away, there's a young girl. She's maybe 13, 14. She's got a red dress on. She's smiling, I think. She's in the distance, you know, quite far away. And I put that up on my wall just, I've noticed, I hadn't noticed that I've been doing it everywhere I've ever lived. And I think the reason for putting it up there is to think, who's listening to her? Who's listening to that girl? And I don't doubt a lot of people are, parents, the rest stuff. But when it comes to what brings us in this room around disasters, recovery, decisions that affect her life, I never want to forget that idea of who's listening to people without power, without authority, without voice. And I'm certain everybody in this room fully agrees, by the way, the how we do that. How do we actually listen? And that brings me on to a second thing, a second observation. Most of my work in poorer countries was actually in development, chronic poverty, and then also moving into the disaster space, because they often go hand in hand, right? Vulnerability, poverty, disasters, they're not you know, absent from each other. And there's a quote from a very famous aid thinker called Robert Chambers in the 90s, and he came out with the phrase, whose reality counts. Super powerful. If in doubt, several people are nodding, he's very well known. If in doubt, whose reality counts? So in that picture, me, the aid worker savior, you know, in India in the 90s, does it matter, a middle-aged white male, now proudly Australian, you know, does it matter what I think? Absolutely not. Maybe you bring something to it, but my reality doesn't matter in the sense of I get to go to my nice hotel, all that stuff. So you know where I'm leading here, it's the power thing, it's the stuff, it's the decisioning, it's how it's enacted. And when I say listening, it's shorthand for doing assessments. You know, there are tons of assessments, approaches, methods, things to do that we all use that are imperfect, but that's okay, but we do it. Very often the excuse is, though, not to do it, and that's when the question mark comes out. Now, I'm talking about my own experience for what that's worth, and there's a lot of experience in this room. If we added it up, it's probably into the millennia, probably literally. But don't just take anecdotes. There's a lot of research between the disconnect of who's listening and how things are decided and how people with less power have a voice in their recovery, and just shifting to talk about disaster recovery. Of course, there's no surprise here, and it's the systems, and I'll come back to the systems in a moment. Research by Mary Anderson, 5 years, 5,000 people, Africa, Asia, Europe, Latin America, and I think this part of the world, I'm not sure, asked people what their experiences were of post-disaster recovery. And a lot of it, of course, was, thank you very much, you've literally saved my life. It's been very powerful, thank you. This is not a hatchet job on NGOs. You know, thank you very much. But the title of the report was Time to Listen. And the overriding thing in every continent, just look at it, was thank you very much, but slow down and listen to us. Listen to our recovery. That voice needs to be in the recovery. And, you know, I mean, people in this room, you know, who have worked with a lot of communities and done stuff, and the frustration of hearing people, but then not having those involved in the systems that we have, okay? So that's one bit of the story, and I know everyone here that's familiar. There's nothing new there. Okay, so that's one bit of the story. Just jumping to the side here, the second bit of what brings us here to this How We Survive launch in this very nice place is thanks to our benefactor, Judith Nielsen. Many of you probably know of Judith Nielsen. The White Rabbit Gallery, a philanthropist, does many things, the Institute of Journalism. Well, I know this story coming up because she told me this story. She called me up and I nearly fell over when she did, about 6 years ago. She said that the reason why, okay, sorry, let me back up a little bit. 10 years ago, I told you to be a bit informal. Ragged at the edges, that's okay, it's quite nice, ragged at the edges. 10 years ago, she was in Cape Town, driving past a large slum, informal settlement called Kailicha, very well known, very large, very well known, been there for decades. And there had been a fire, and there were people standing on the street, or crying, or sitting down, and it's babies, and it's children, and it's women, and it's men. And again, nothing unusual there, I'm sorry to say. You know, how fires start in slums is it's a whole other world, I won't go off on one now. But you know, a whole bundle of things, no healthcare, no insurance, no stuff. And like a regular empathetic human being was really that kind of thing. So she was back in Australia, and she, lucky for UNSW, picked up this conversation with our former Dean of the Built Environment, Alex Zarnes, who's a well-known architect. And between them, they developed what became known as the Judith Neilson Chair in Architecture. And that was put in place in 2015. And there are some really unusual things about that kind of thing I want to point out that gives us the leverage for us to be here today. And that, I mean, thank you, Judith. Oh, goodness, thank you, Judith. And we have people from the Judith Neilson Foundation here, so thank you for being here today. One is, it's a tremendous gift. It was a lot of money. And that was an endowment in perpetuity, which for UNSW means 50 years. Don't ask me why, but it does. But that's great. So we have quite a lot of money in a separate account until 2064. We've used up 9 years of it already, 10 years, doing stuff. So we have that. The second bit and the point of an endowed chair is to have what they call that academic freedom. Not to bore people to death, although that's quite possible, but to actually do truth to power. That thing was separately funded. Imagine how potent that is. We're separately funded. The money's in the bank. The only reason it would go is, I don't know what, we had a pandemic and they didn't touch it. I mean, it is extraordinary funding. Thanks to Judith, thanks to the structures of universities, I suppose, which brings us here today. So if you had that first bit, a systemic problem, a post-disaster recovery, which is a global systemic challenge, full stop at the end, by the way, look at the evidence. And the second one, you had funding for 40 years to address a systemic, what's in the too hard box problem that people will tell you you can't change. You can't change that, all right? And I mean, we got, what, 100 people here would have 100 different systemic problems, by the way. This just happens to be one that a few of us some years ago started to ponder about. By the way, HowWeSurvive was named by an Indian NGO, Seeds, who won the Sasakar Award last year, UN Sasakar Award, the biggest award. They know what they're doing. And a lot of the thinking about what we're doing is actually from other countries, just to throw that in. So what we thought would be the systemic challenge is this, and it's community-centered recovery for real. I've never met a human being on planet Earth who does not believe that community-centered recovery is the right way around, by the way. There's no, my God, no, it can't be that. But it's the systems that we have, it's the KPIs, the short-termism, the having to spend a lot quickly, and I'm thinking of everywhere, by the way, not just any particular place. I mean, we all have our stories. The goodwill, the transition from relief where, you know, rightly so, it's go do this now, to actually changing agency and authority and power in a way, the immediacy versus the long term, the what do you transition to, a whole bundle of things. And I know in this room there is a lot of expertise on that area. So that's what brings us to today, to how we survive. The tonality, by the way, is, because, you know, beware the saviors, right? It's always working collaboratively, it's always with modesty, it's with dignity and respect, and if we get it right, it's in the background. I just want to say that because, you know, the savior thing pervades our sector, not because people are evil, it just does. I'm completely gone off script, by the way, which is clearly very obvious. So let me stop rambling. I'm just going to show you 4 or 5 images, okay? And a big shout out to our friends and colleagues from the Friday Collective at the back there who've been working with us this last year. So the last year, we put out job ads. We got the most fabulous team in the world. It's very humbling to be engaged with. I can tell you that. You'll meet a lot of team. And then we worked with a great crowd, the Friday Collective, thinking about how we structure, how we do stuff. Our website, HowWeSurvive.com, is now live. It went out 5 days ago. We're beyond thrilled by it. You won't see any pictures of people in it, by the way. You won't see any saviors. You won't see that. You know, it's a tricky business we do. There's a respect dignity thing. And we're trying to get it right. All feedback is welcome. But what they did working with us was to come out with this triangle. I just love it. I just put it up there. So this summarizes endless weeks, months, years of discussion, okay? All right? And I just want to go through it. It's fairly obvious. Getting recovery right. Alliteration is always very powerful. So getting recovery right. Again, everybody in this room, I am 100% sure, wants to get recovery right, knowing there's always a better way. The Michael Crouch quote, there's always a better way. It may be what we're doing right now is very, very good. This is not this is not a that thing, but there's always a better way. So getting recovery right, that's always collaborative. Now I mentioned the truth to power thing, the academic freedom thing at the top. We're deliberately being provocative. So what we want to do, always in a friendly, polite way, by the way, because we're all very nice people, is it's a broken system and it's breaking people. Now, some here might say, ouch, that's too much. But, you know, we're at a time of, we know climate change, urban growth, more vulnerability. Things are about to change again, as they always do. Let's hope for the better, but we have big challenges. Is what we do right now adequate? Okay? And our long-term funding enables us to work with others to discuss that and probe. All right? Bottom left, when communities are heard, recovery works. I'd point to the evidence. I personally believe that, but who cares about that? The evidence points to that ownership, that agency, all that stuff. Okay? And then the bottom right, policies and practices must put communities first. Again, I mean, read everything, the state stuff, it's all about that, so rightly so. So this is not a contested thing, it's around supporting and working and engaging and collaborating around that. Things that we might be able to say that frankly others might not because of funding, not because of evil, but just because of stuff, you know, that kind of thing. So we want to perform that function, okay? I'm sort of tempted to stop there, but I won't. I've just got 3-4 more slides before I pass on to my colleagues. But we also want it to be clear, simple, an informed 14-year-old gets it. You know, we'll do all the back office stuff and all the things, and we'll do all that kind of thing. We've got brainy people in the team. But, you know, the making it simple, making it clean, making it clear is our absolute mission to do this. Okay? All right. It did work when I did this. It's just a 40-second video. Again, thanks to our Friday Collective friends and colleagues. Summarizes it up, I think.
Everyone agrees that after a disaster, the best approach is community-centred recovery. But this rarely happens. How We Survive is setting out to change that. We will listen to communities and share what works. We will call out practices that don't work. And together, we will make change happen. Join us on our journey to reshape disaster recovery for the better.
Great. Thank you. So just to show you just a couple of more things, just pretty briefly, actually. I think the thing that I think we're most wildly excited about, and a big shout out to our friend and colleague here, Laura, who worked on this. This you can see in front of you, it's a map of Australia. Laura worked and gathered 1,000 stories from Royal Commission reports going back 25 years of floods, bushfires, the rest. And again, working with our Friday Collective friends, they worked out a way to do it in a clever way. I didn't trust going on the website because, you know, so these are stills, but it's very interactive. It's a call to add your stories also, okay? You know, some simple rules. It won't be personally offensive or anything like that. We will moderate, but, you know, we won't cut down stuff. This particular story, New South Wales, is very positive about the evacuation. Great. So we're just putting it up there. So the telling stories, the how we survive. So yeah, we're going to do lots of clever ways to make a noise about how we build that up. Our ambitions are high, you know, start in Australia, maybe if there's traction, it's regional, maybe it's more. Let's see where it takes us. But again, it's very simple stuff it's people's stories of how we survive out there. Okay. Just 4 things I mentioned earlier on. These are starting points. In 5 years' time, we might be doing very different things. It's serendipity and starting points. Some of the work we're doing at the moment, just quick summaries. There are 4 of them. Well, in fact, there are 5 of them. Listening. We might do an independent every 2 years state of listening report. It's actually based on the state of the humanitarian system, global report from our friends in the UK, ALNAP, doing that kind of thing. The independence of what worked we celebrate. If there's a better way, what is it? All those kinds of things. So we find a way, we might do a report that's that, or it might be animations. We don't know yet. We would welcome all thoughts on that. The second thing, we're kicking off and very much being led by Kate, community-led recovery. You may have seen the survey that's out there, the QR code. What does community-led recovery mean? And really discuss that and think about that. We're using the phrase community-led recovery because that's the phraseology and the relevant guidelines that we're looking at. So that kind of work. Housing, we've been working on an AHURI project, Australia Housing Urban Research Institute project, across Australia with RMIT and Curtin. University. We've been leading that. We've been very lucky to spend time in Lismore, also with colleagues in Western Australia and also Queensland, 7 case studies from across the country about what works, what could be better when it comes to post-disaster housing, which we all know, well, actually, to quote a report from 10 years ago, one of the most intractable problems in disaster recovery globally. It's really hard. Okay, so we're looking at that. The final one I'll just highlight, bar one, corruption. You might think, really, corruption? But we all know there's no such thing as a natural disaster. Wrong place, wrong time, vulnerability, the building that fell down, all that kind of stuff, the flood zones. We've been doing some work some years now with colleagues in other countries around what's the corruption that fuels disasters, okay? And it's murky and complex. And there are some people working in this area, and it's completely fascinating. And this country is not immune from that, as is every country in the world. So that's the kind of stuff we're looking at. My final 2 slides, again, Kate's been working on the Disaster Recovery Almanac, and there are some people in this room, I think, who contributed to that. The idea is every year to ask 12 people a simple question: what do you think of recovery, whatever it might be. This is being launched. The graphics are amazing. It's going to be launched, and this is my final slide, I think, at an event we're holding at UNSW on the 19th of September. And Daniel Aldrich, I know some of you know Daniel, is coming over. We've invited him over to be part of our Judith Nielsen Ertzon lecture. It's free, please sign up. In fact, it was today the university is doing a big push on that. Please come along and also hear more about the Almanac. So that's the summary. We're at the starting point. Please enjoy the day. It's supposed to be enjoyable, informative, networking, and I would love to hand over right now to my friend and colleague, Dr. Lisa Ewanson. Lisa.
Hi everyone. Thank you, David. That was wonderful. So my name is Lisa Ewanson, and it's fabulous to be part of this new initiative. And I also want to thank Yvonne, who had to go, for her beautiful welcome to country. And I also want to acknowledge that we are on the unceded lands of the Gadigal people and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So, to talk about myself for a little bit, which I don't generally love, but anyway, today my background is in both social work practice and law. And so I have a distinct and particular lens guiding my work within HowWeSurvive, which I will now briefly introduce. Social workers work in long-term positions alongside communities across Australia, as well as working specifically in disaster-related roles. However, social workers are generally under-recognised within the disaster sector. There is a widespread lack of understanding about our skill base, the differing spheres and domains of our practice and of our approaches. Social work practice, as framed by our Code of Ethics, ensures a staunch commitment to relationality, reciprocity, social justice, compassion, human rights, trauma-informed and person-centred approaches, and community and individual self-determination in all aspects of social work practice, including that of research. Contributing to the evidence base, aiming to strengthen the recognition of social workers in disaster within Australia is a central part of my research in this team, and this work's been kindly supported by the Australian Association of Social Workers and ADA, and thank you to the reps who are here. Moving on from that, yet closely related to the under-recognition of social work issues, we all know that life course events, disadvantages, systems of oppression and policy context shape the housing pathways of women, housing pathways which can then be further impacted by disaster. While women do overall have far greater access to education and employment than 50 years ago, the precarious housing existence of many women, and in particular older women, belies these social and economic gains. Understanding the processes of housing recovery for women after disaster, embedding an intersectional and life course approach, drawing upon social work methodologies is a key research pillar in its very early stages of development. Thirdly, human rights-based discourse and analysis underpins absolutely all of my work. I wholeheartedly, with enthusiasm, embrace the normative frameworks of international human rights law and believe that these are effective tools which should be applied in the arena of disaster recovery to guide state action and to shape government accountability. The recent trailblazing Torres Strait 8 case, where the complainants had a positive finding from the United Nations Human Rights Committee holding the Australian government to account for their homes being washed away on their low-lying islands, is but one powerful example of this. The hopefully soon forthcoming Federal Human Rights Act, incorporating economic, social and cultural rights, including the right to adequate housing and the right to a healthy environment, will provide a domestic framework for accountability and standards for all, including for communities recovering from disaster. And finally, I've been invited by the amazing You Are in Our League initiative within UNSW, working closely with Associate Professor Ruth McCausland and Peter McGilvray to be part of a Walgett-based disasters response and recovery project. This project is led in partnership with the Darrawah Elders Group and the Walgett Aboriginal Medical Service. The events of the only supermarket in town burning down in 2019 of COVID-19 and then of the 2022 floods revealed that for Walgett, there are a number of compounding factors, including ongoing processes of colonisation, which result in the community being disproportionately negatively affected by such disasters. So this is a very long-term project with a really large investigatory team using a community-led and place-based approach, aiming to inform the improvement of the processes of disaster response and recovery for the Aboriginal community in Walgett. So there, in conclusion, as we here all know, disasters spotlight inequities, and this spotlight drives my advocacy and all of our advocacy for social justice and disaster justice in our warming world. If pre-existing contexts go unrecognised, especially for marginalised communities, prolonged processes of disaster recovery will simply, at best, perpetuate the inequitable status quo. My journey within disaster recovery begins with these pillars, and I look forward to working with you all and meeting some more of you here tonight. And now I would like to introduce my wonderful colleague, Dr. Tim Heffernan. So I'll just...
Thank you, Lisa and David, and to Yvonne as well. It's great to be with you all here today. My name is Tim Heffernan. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the projects that I've been part of as a member of HowWeSurvive. Some of these predate HowWeSurvive, but we're really keen to scale some of these up and to continue to sort of build on our learnings and to understand things in this initiative. So, as is well known, disasters greatly affect human society and the environment. Trained as an anthropologist, that is, the study of what it means to be human, and to live in distinct socio-cultural worlds, my contribution to HowWeSurvive is to examine how communities understand and respond to adverse events, and navigate systems and cultures of crisis and disaster management. So, for instance, how do people come to terms with what it means, what happens when disasters strike? How do they reconcile with the systems and culture of disaster management, and oftentimes failings by decision makers to mitigate hazards or to adequately plan for different scenarios? And what does recovery look like from different points of view, noting that recovery is never linear or straightforward? These are some of the questions that I'm interested in. Over the past few years, I've been working in the Snowy Valleys in southwestern New South Wales, which was an area that was affected by the 2019-20 bushfires. And we worked with 7 towns and villages on an implementation project called the Resilient Towns Initiative. And we've got some friends and colleagues in the audience today who were part of that. So thanks for being here. And we sought to ask what kinds of formulations of people, of processes, structures and supports work well in disaster management. Is it a top-down and command and control formulation? Or can and should communities play a larger role in the ways that disasters are managed? How can community-centred recovery actually be achieved? And how can a community-centred approach become a viable entry point going forward into disaster risk reduction more generally? The Resilient Towns Initiative in the Snowy Valleys supported the work of 7 communities to be in the driver's seat of their recovery through workshopping their theories of change, providing small grants to resource their ideas, linking residents to beneficial trainings, and drafting scenario and preparedness plans for the future that were all driven by members of the community. Another research area, following on from David and Lisa's work that we've heard today, is whose voice actually is heard in disaster recovery. We suggest that despite the best of intentions, disaster recovery is often very adult-centric. In the Snowy Valleys, we noticed, for instance, that young people were largely missing from recovery initiatives. So we co-designed with them a series of engagement activities to bolster young people's participation and to ensure that their voices and perspectives could be heard in the local community. More recently, a larger team and I have worked in the Snowy Valleys, but also in the Northern Rivers in the north of New South Wales, to understand people's experiences of housing evacuation, displacement, and housing recovery after bushfires and floods. This research was funded by the Australian Housing and Urban Research Institute. Again, we've been interested in how communities themselves can be better embedded into decision-making to support recovery and housing pathways after disaster. And finally, across this and other projects that we're developing, we're really interested in the question of what made the disaster worse. What kinds of decisions and behaviours have meant that the effects of unmitigated hazards have led to worse outcomes for people? And this includes, poorly planned, designed and built housing and infrastructure, but also things like, as David mentioned, corruption and impropriety. And also the grave effects of leaving out certain voices or denying the benefit of a community-centred approach. These are just some of the projects that I've been working on, and today marks a really special day for the whole team, and we're really excited to share our work and our future plans with you all today. So now I'm going to pass over to Kate, who's going to talk about some indicators.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming along. This has been a long time in the making, a lot of planning, and we have our fabulous colleague Nat, who's going to be one of our only team members not up the front, who's really done everything today. So if you see Nat running around, you should thank Nat. I'd like to acknowledge the country that we're on and pay my respects. I actually grew up on the beautiful Darrell country, which is about an hour south of here, but spent a lot of my, part of my 20s at least, living on Gadigal land, so I'd like to pay my respects. So I have had the good fortune to meet a lot of you in the room before in the different roles that I have. I wear a couple of different hats in disaster recovery. So I'm a researcher with HowWeSurvive. I also headed up the Australian Red Cross Disaster Recovery Program for a while, and I'm now their technical advisor. I'm also an honorary researcher at the University of Melbourne, which basically tells you I suck at leaving jobs and I haven't really chosen a lane yet, but today, with my HowWeSurvive hat on, I'm really fortunate to be able to talk about a project that we're trying to set up for the long term. As David has said, we are in a position of intense privilege, and we recognise that intense privilege. We know that having core, stable funding, even if it can't fund all of the work that we want to do, but allowing for stability within a team is a rare and precious thing that is so unusual in this sector, in both academia and practice. And the main aim of HowWeSurvive is to change that narrative, as my colleagues have been talking about, from top-down approaches to community-centred approaches relating to disaster recovery. Now, I am so confident that everybody in this room, because I know a lot of you, really spend their lives working towards improving outcomes for disaster-affected people, and you do it in a range of ways. You do it through trying to prevent the risk of disasters that is created through inequity. You do it through providing services and evidence-informed interventions. You do it through building evidence bases. You do it through releasing funding for other people to do work. You do it through advocacy for ensuring that people who don't normally get to sit around the table's voices are heard. We're all working, I think, broadly in the same direction. We're all using different levers, and we all face different boundaries and different barriers to the type of work we're doing in that one direction. But despite this, I think that there are two fundamental questions that we struggle to answer specifically, regularly and predictably in systematic ways. To me, these two fundamental questions are, what are people's lives like after disasters? When it comes to the stuff of life, our health, our relationships, our connection to culture, our education, our livelihoods, how do we come through disasters in the long term? Can we honestly, specifically, consistently and reliably answer this? I think the answer is no, even if we can do it in some piecemeal ways. I don't think we can consistently answer this in Australia. And the second question that I don't think we can consistently answer is, do we make it better? Does the recovery system make these experiences better? Do we as the system improve things? How can we improve things? Can we hand on our heart say that we measure effectively, consistently, meaningfully and reliably our impact and what it is that we do? And again, I think the answer is no, despite the best of intentions. There are many people here who have tried, who do try all the time to contribute to answering these questions. But the reality of short-term funding cycles, of short agency and departmental shelf life, of short attention spans, makes this brutally difficult to continue to carry out over the longer term. And that's what the privilege of being able to design a 40-year initiative does. It takes away some of that. So do we want to do this all on our own? Hell no, absolutely not. Do we want to work with all of you to do this? Absolutely. Some of you will have seen David present these things over the last couple of years, using examples from organisations such as Transparency International or the World Humanitarian Summit, where there's been indicators that have been used to give really high-level sort of temperature gauges and checks around how some different fundamental core issues are tracking. So for the last few months, I've been trawling indicators to look at how we stand on the shoulders of giants to figure out what it is that we should be tracking and trying to whittle them down to something manageable. I am not going to go down the rabbit holes and spaghetti diagrams that have come out of looking out of all these indicators. If anyone would like to administer Psych First Aid later, I will talk to you about it over a coffee or a drink and you can tell me it's all going to be okay. But we've started drafting some stuff based on that work and we are asking for your feedback. So if we think about some simple, enduring indicators that exist in the world that don't tell us whole and complete stories, but give us a really good proxy indicator for some stuff that's going on, there are some really good examples. One is the Big Mac indicator. This was invented by The Economist in 1986 as a light-hearted way with a catchy hook to talk about the purchasing parity of currencies across the world, and is a simplified way of looking at a really complicated exchange rate theory, but it can be updated regularly, easily, and cheaply. The indicator definitely has its critics, but it's widely used and reasonably well understood and stands in as a proxy for lots of other complex issues. There's another one that used to get used a lot around 10 years ago. It was either from the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence or the Jesuit Social Services, I think, but I actually can't find it, so if anyone has it, I would like the reference. But it was 2 questions that was about social indicator capitals. And the first question was, if you had 24 hours and had to hustle together $500, could you do it? And the second was, if you had 24 hours and had to move your fridge, could you find someone to help you move it? Now, those 2 questions are really simple to answer, but they tell us a lot. They unpack a really complex story in very simple questions. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get some of these simple indicators. We are not finished. Anyone who knows me knows I need to work to a deadline, and that's where the 40-year thing is not working for me. But we need things that need to be able to be measured and tracked over time for disaster-affected individuals and communities so that we can see how they're tracking over the long term. Every single one of these things that I'm about to list is nothing that we have invented. We are deliberately trying to draw from others' work. We're not trying to reinvent any wheels. We're trying to draw from the stuff that's out there. So with the first set of indicators, we're really looking at life after disasters. And when I think about life after disasters, I really think about, I draw from, some of you will have heard this, that there's a guy who's the CEO of the Waimak District Council in New Zealand after the Canterbury earthquakes, a guy named Jim Palmer. And the story is that he told his team 3 or 4 days after the February 2011 earthquakes, we will not be measured by the kilometres of roads and pipes that we replace over time. We will be measured by how our people come through this. And I think we need to really start thinking about this. Not what are our outputs, but how do our people come through this? So there's some really, a couple of, like, you're going to look at these and go like, yeah, duh, we get it. Like, I promise you, it's taken me hundreds of hours of reading to whittle it down to get to this sort of simplifies point. About, are these the domains that we want to look at? And we want your feedback. Are they the right domains? And if not, why not? And if so, what existing indicators are out there that we need to be looking at? So with life after disasters, I think we need to be looking at health, housing and homes, safety, connection, work and education, hope, environment, and dignity. And if I can give you an example of indicators that are widely used and that other people are drawing on, an example in the health domain that the federal government is looking at doing in their new wellbeing framework, these are the 3 indicators that they're looking to cover the whole country in wellbeing, looking at health. They're looking at life expectancy, they're looking at mental health, and the prevalence of chronic conditions in different populations. We want to know, are these the right sort of things to be looking at? Are there different ones that we should be looking at? They're not the only ones that are out there. There are hundreds, if not thousands out there, so we've got to choose. The second is about the experiences of the disaster recovery system. And there is, again, an awful lot of indicators that we can draw from both domestically and internationally when we do this. This is stuff that people have been trying to figure out for a long time. But I think there is a crux of a question that we are trying to get to that is a pretty uncomfortable question. And if I can take a 1-minute detour to try and sort of explain where I'm trying to go here. Has anyone heard of the phrase, "I choose the bear"? There's a couple of nods, but not many because a lot of you, like me, are old. So in the first half of 2024, there was some stuff on TikTok. Do I know about this because I'm on TikTok? No, because I read about traditional media's summary of what was going on TikTok. So basically, in the first half of 2024, this question went out. It was picked up by a couple of prominent channels and it went viral for a while. And women were asked to answer one question, one simple indicator question. If you were alone in the woods, would you prefer to run into a random man or a bear? And the vast majority of women chose the bear. And in that simple answer, it unpacked a lot of complexity. The comments that came through it were so telling. There were things like, the bear would only attack me if I provoked it. The only thing the bear could do would be attack me. People would believe me if I said that a bear attacked me. People would think I needed help if a bear had attacked me. No one would ask me to make nice with the bear to make their life more comfortable. I'm not financially reliant on the bear to be able to survive. Many, many men of the internet were unhappy with this answer. Not all men, of course. But I wonder, in my years of working with communities after disasters, if we don't need to ask ourselves a pretty awful bear-like question. How many of us have heard that the recovery system is the second more awful, more painful disaster that people experience? Who of us is a bit worried that if you had to say which was worse, your experience of the hazard event or your experience of the helping system that came after, that we wouldn't like the answer that came out? And so based on some frameworks that exist, there are a few questions that I think that we need reliable, consistent answers to help inform the way we work, to help us tackle that ultimate bear question of disaster recovery. I think they are, I can reliably get what I need after a disaster. I understand what support is available after a disaster. Our community is in a better place since this support was made available. I trust the organisations that are involved in the disaster recovery system, and I can meaningfully contribute to decisions that affect my recovery. I don't know if I've got these domains right. I don't know what the right indicator is to look at that. So we are asking for some feedback on this, and I'll show you how in just a second. But just before I finish up, I wanted to share a story about something that was pretty mortifying that happened to me a couple of months ago. There's actually been quite a few mortifying things this year that have happened to me in public places, so, I had my selection. But a few months ago, I got the chance to go to the US, to go to the Natural Hazards Workshop and to meet up with a bunch of colleagues on a couple of different projects. And because the timing was right, and because David and his colleagues are very nice people, Dave was over teaching at Harvard. He teaches there every year on an urban disasters course, and they threw me a pity lecture for my CV, which is very kind of them. And when I turned up to it, I had to speak on the morning that I arrived. So I hadn't had a chance to get to know the cohort. I didn't really know the other speakers that were speaking. And I did my thing, I talked about disaster recovery in Australia. Here are some, principles that we use. Here are some case studies you might like to look at. Yeah, we know what we're doing. We're doing pretty well. The person that spoke after me was talked about how to provide post-disaster aid in territories controlled by armed non-state actors, so effectively massive organised gangs or terrorists. The person after that talked about how to use the humanitarian notification system in urban disasters in conflict zones and how it doesn't work so well, and they're trying really hard to stop their aid workers getting killed. And then when we moved to the discussion, one of the participants talked about the challenge of setting up housing in 7 days for 7 million people after an earthquake in the middle of a cholera epidemic, so I felt very relevant. They were all very nice to me, and they asked really encouraging questions, and I had to very awkwardly point out, no, that at no point had I ever had to engage the humanitarian notification system for the work that I was doing, and no, even if I did get into heated and robust discussions with people, they were sometimes occasionally a bit rude to me and might not answer my phone call next time straight away, but at no point was I under any risk of being executed when I walked out to get my lunch. And so, like, obviously all I wanted to do was slip out the back door, go and get a drink, and never ever return and see any of these people ever again. But that night I had some dinner and went for a walk, and I kind of tried to shake it off, and I thought, you know what, screw it, I think that's the wrong message to take away from this. Because I reckon if I went into that room and asked those people to take away, say, the top 5 things that were making their lives hard, they would be describing here. We have a democracy. We do not have a situation where people are routinely killed or disappeared for protesting against things that aren't working. We have universal healthcare, we have a good education system, we have all the things. Am I trying to say they're perfect? Of course I'm not. I'm going to be the first person who, says that we can't say those things because of the mortality rate gap for Indigenous people or the such poor outcomes that are tied to socioeconomic status with access to health or access to education or the gender pay gap. I'm not going to defend that it's perfect, but it's pretty good. We should, in that context, we should be flawless. We should be the envy of the world at how good we are. We should be seamless. And the outcomes for the communities that we serve should reflect that. And we should be able to measure it and tell people about it. So, down from Soapbox, here is a QR code to a survey, because we're researchers. We want to hear about this. We're going to be talking to people over the coming months. Do we have these indicators right? Are we on the right page? Talk to us. We want to hear about whether or not we've got it right. So, I'm going to hand back to David, and then we're going to have some food, I think.
Well, can I just say in America, you went down very well. And it was brilliant. I'd love to ask my colleagues, could you come and sit up? Only if you want to. Okay, we might have some map questions. Laura's our map suprema, so that's good. We just got 10 minutes before we take some lunch and nibbles and chat for a while. Very informally, I hope you get our sort of sense of this. We've got roving mics around the room. Is that good? Yep. Yeah, so if anyone's got a question, we've got a mic. Yeah, beautiful, thanks very much. Okay, so just to say, if you could give your name and any particular organization you're with. The best questions have a question mark at the end. I heard someone say once, that was a beautiful statement. But sir.
Sean Tupper, Public Safety Canada. So the Canadian question, will some of this appear on your website for those of us who can't stay here and engage day to day? Because you've really intrigued me. There's a ton of work that's so similar to work we're doing in Canada. I would love to be able to kind of pick up on some of these ideas and follow through.
Well, thank you, Scott. I'll just take that one. The answer is yes. We're very lucky. We've got colleagues who are filming all this. Yes is the answer, and we'd love to be in touch. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Angelique, Reconstruction Authority. Thanks very much. Kate, so much of what you put up, I'm nodding in furious agreement with you, but so much of it is dependent on getting the funding models right. And I think that one of the key barriers that I see to that is the funding required from state governments, from Commonwealth governments and from local governments to support people in disaster recovery. How hopeful are you, and this is probably a big question, that your research will influence the way we fund disaster recovery in this country?
So I'm screwed either way I answer that, right? So if I say, yeah, our research is totally going to be the thing that drives that, then there's a lot of pressure. And if I say no, then what's the point in doing it? I mean, I think I don't want to be that person who's like, let me tell you a war story about when I was a kid and had to walk through the snow. But I think there are incremental changes that have been happening bit by bit by bit over the last 20, 25 years in Australia that are pushing us in the right direction. I think when we think about things on a day-to-day basis, it is really easy to sort of hang our heads and go, this is awful, like there's no way out of it. But it's not true. We're in the middle of it, right? Like we're in the murky middle of how things are going. I would like to think that this research will contribute not only by being able to give governments some pretty solid ground to be able to say, look, it turns out if we invest here, here are the outcomes that have been avoided, or if we're not investing in this, this is, you know, it's really hard to do it if you don't have that to grab onto. I think we're in a really lucky situation in that I can count on like one hand in the career that I've had in this sector where there's been bad actors, you know, like people who are deliberately trying to not make things better or trying to interfere with something. So I think it's really a matter of, and this is one of the things the panel's going to talk about later, we need to know what different levers different people need. So I'd like to think that the research will contribute to that. Is it going to be the catch-all? Like, I mean, I'd be a narcissist if I was like, yeah. So I would like to think it would contribute.
If you've still got the microphone, I'd love to ask you that question. Do you think things can change for the better? Could you
Much better answer. I should have just done
that. This is what we can do. We're independently funded. Could you take the microphone back? Could you address the question? Could you answer the question you asked?
Look, from where I sit, I think that we need far better evidence of what works. I'm seeing billions of dollars in investment across New South Wales and previously across Victoria, and I think that we do need a far better evidence base about what works in what conditions and how do we roll out programs consistently across this country, because it makes no sense to me that if you live on one side of the border you get something and on the other side you get something different. And so I'm an optimist. I wouldn't have been doing this work for close to 30 years if I wasn't, and I do think the system is incrementally changing for the better, but I think we still have a long way to go, and I think that a commitment to a long-term research agenda that can influence how we better do our systems of recovery is really critical for all of us.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thanks, Amanda. I just want to add to that, like that the idea, and this is, I straddle a couple of different worlds in the role I'm in, but the idea that research can be the saviour for government policy, I mean, I think all researchers want to think that we can do that, but anyone who's worked in government or for a not-for-profit knows that it's one element, right? Like it's one element. Hamish Clark put it really well in his, if you don't follow Hamish Clark's blog, you should be following it, but he put it really well when he talks about the idea of scientists contributing to government is like having a seat at the kids' table. Like you can be seen and you can be recognised and you can be valued, but you are it's one portion of what government has to consider. So we should be doing our best to make that portion as significant and as helpful as possible.
Thank you. Oh, good. Some hands. I'm not sure I got the order, but can I go to this, to you first, and then you, and then you?
Thank you, Ellie from Resilient Lismore. Mine probably comes from the bottom up now that we're thinking about how it might help the government systems. So 40 years is a really long time for a project. So I'm curious about how this work will influence the practice and leadership at the community level in response to disasters. And I use the word community-led very deliberately rather than community-centred.
All I'm going to do now that David's pulled that trick before is say, Ellie, how is it going to influence the work that you're doing? Because that was a much better response.
That would be the point.
I mean, and this is one of the things we've got to figure out, I have a strong challenge personally with academic publications, and people who know that about me know that I've picked a dumb career path because I find them very difficult. But it's one of those things around how do you translate research that can be peer reviewed and sort of checked and balanced into the stuff that people need. So Amanda's going to need something entirely different to what Ellie's going to need. Ellie's going to need something different to what Melinda's going to need. Melinda's going to need something different to what Marie's going to need. And yeah, that's that's my non-answer to you. What do you think? Like, how do we use it?
And just, may I just add to that? Absolutely, we met a couple of years ago. You may not remember when I said we're thinking of this thing, what do you think? And we did the same with a lot of people in this room saying, tell us why we shouldn't do this. And you were very polite, by the way, knowing how busy you are, Ellie. If we can provide something to support that something about something and something, and I say that with complete confidence, by the way, we can be open-ended, then that would be absolutely fantastic. So a lot of today is an offer, by the way. Do you care to say anything, or should we keep going? Tim?
Thank you for the question. And I was just going to add a little bit as well, which is, I guess as a team, we're all qualitative researchers coming from, various sort of disciplinary backgrounds. But I guess our contribution across many of the projects that we hope to do won't necessarily be, numbers and stats and things like that might sort of give a number to a particular phenomena or something like that. I think we're quite interested as well in like the experience on the ground, particularly over time as well. And I think we're all quite well suited from our different disciplines to do that. And I think that's a really important part, trying to understand sort of qualitatively and experientially like what's happening and what are the sort of levers that we could suggest could be pulled or further sort of developed or whatever it is to also sort of help with community leadership, but also with different sort of tensions in communities, that sort of thing, in relation to disaster recovery.
Beautiful. Thank you, Tim. I know there were some hands up. There was one. Yes, please. Yes.
Hello. This is the Canadian corner over here. My name is Pam Sitcote. I'm working for state government in disaster management. And I'm interested in the indicators that you talked about, Kate. I work in the preparedness team, and this year New South Wales government launched the State Disaster Mitigation Plan. And there's a lot of thinking around number of lives saved, number of properties saved. And I noticed that your indicators didn't include those sorts of things. Can you tell us about why you made a decision not to include that? And is that something you encourage government to think about also, or are these complementary indicators?
Thanks, Pam. I think they're complementary, and I think other people have got those immediate metrics sort of covered. Like, I think if we're thinking about indicators or metrics that we currently pay attention to, I think they are paid attention to. It's been a deliberate position in terms of thinking about the longer term recovery, but also around moving away from the hazard being the central focus of things, and it more to being about life experiences. I thank you for the Dixer, Pam, because you and I have had a number of chats about, the idea of when we talk about government policy, for example, preparing, what are we trying to prepare for? And I think I've become really obsessed with this phrase lately, specificity allows for intervention. And this idea that if we just say, we're trying to prepare, it's like, prepare for what? Like, it's the same with at risk. Like, at risk of a bad haircut is very different to at risk of, it's on my mind, Tim, is very different to being like at risk of being homeless or at risk of not having enough food, and the intervention points are different. So if we're thinking about preparing for what? Preparing to survive 24, 42, 72 hours, very important, but is that what we're preparing for? Or are we preparing for children and young people to not fall off track education-wise over 20 years? Are we talking about preparing for, just because you experience that 24 hours, your livelihood is going to be screwed for the next 50? Are we talking about preparing for not having a surge of gender-based violence that then has ramifications for poverty, ramifications for education, ramifications for livelihoods? So it's deliberate is the short answer.
Yeah, and it is genuine. This work in progress of the indicators is your shout out to, we want to get it right and make it helpful, right? So all that stuff. So it's a consultation. I hope we haven't come over with any answers. We deliberately haven't. We've come out with these kinds of things. And it's a very deliberate way of doing it, by the way. Okay, we got time for one more question, perhaps? Is there one at the back there? Or two? Change it. Oh, there's a question over here.
Okay. We were tossing up. We were saying, you go. No, you go.
Blood off at the back.
Okay.
And then we'll go to you.
Louise Mitchell, University of Sydney, and I also work for Emergency Recovery Victoria. And Kate, I think your hair looks great.
I hate it. I really hate it.
Just a question, because I've been using a little bit the National Monitoring and Evaluation Framework that was developed in the work I've been doing over the years, and I just wondered how you've considered that.
It's in the spaghetti diagram,
Okay.
is the short answer. Yeah, no, I did, but if you think about a lot of the stuff in the monitoring and evaluation framework, there is some really great stuff in there, and a lot of it is quite outputs based or based around that second set of indicators, you know, like the trust and efficiency of service delivery. And so, yes, it is one of the sets of indicators. Yeah. It was one of the sets of measurements that I've included.
Thanks. There's a question down here. Oh, Bridget, I'm so sorry. I didn't see the microphone.
I've got about
Bridget.
a million questions, and I want to collar each of you at the break. But I wanted to ask a question of Lucy, because one of the things you said, David, was about listening. And Lucy, you've been doing the hard work, not listening, but reading. And I'm curious as to what has stood out for you about recovery.
So Bridget Tehan, Red Cross. Thank you very much. Laura.
Yeah, so I guess there were many stories, and going through all of them was really just a journey. Every area around Australia had a completely different experience. Every community responded so differently. And I guess even those individual stories were a lot of them all stood out to me. But there were particular stories that stood out were the ones where communities kind of came together. There were so many communities all around Australia that worked really, really well. And you could see in the way that they wrote, and also a lot of them not only expressed the difficulty, but then also expressed coming back from that. And that was really wonderful to hear. Also reading through all the horrible stories as well, which is, you know, it's not an easy thing to do, but just seeing those stories where there was some hope and there was like coming back, and they were kind of the communities that all really worked together. And so, you know, having that community-centered approach is something that's really important and was really showcased in looking through all these stories. So, I mean, you'll also see on the map the way we've kind of categorized it and shown all the areas. But yeah, it's really hard to almost pinpoint what was the best, because a lot of it was incredible, and just reading through it all. And, you know, not just recent stories, but stories from so many years ago, and then there were so many from, you know, people that have who are, you know, elderly now that experienced disasters 50 years ago, and seeing the transition was also quite incredible to read about and understand how it's changed across so many years. So, yeah.
Thank you.
No, thank you. And thank you again for kicking that off, Laura.
Yeah.
You know, 1,000 stories, no small thing. I think we've got time for one more question, and the gentleman over here. Oh, we'll just wait for the mic to come.
Good afternoon. My name is Jonathan, and part of me works for Monash University. I'd like to follow up that question that Bridget asked, and just to ask you, Laura, and maybe the team, what plans do you have for the stories that you've collected?
I can start. So the initial purpose was to, you know, have something there on the map, have something to showcase. And I guess the next steps will be inviting others to then share their stories, to contribute to the map. So this is kind of just a base point, a reference point, and we've tried to kind of cover across as much as we could. So, you know, not only looking through like a lot of the commissions that have gone out and all the inquiries, but, you know, finding articles and finding people's individual stories. And like now the next steps would be asking for others if they are comfortable, if they would like to then express their own stories, to just continue on this journey really and try and build up the map so there's a lot more voice, because as you saw in the screenshot as well, a lot of the commissions are focused on central areas, or a lot of them are focused on certain parts of Australia, and there's a lot that still hasn't been accounted for. So I guess the hopes are also to just try and reach out to spread that across all of Australia so that all the voices can actually be heard.
Thank you, Laura. And also just following up, I think, it's been a huge effort that Laura's put in, and amazing, and she's gone through so much material, but there will be scope for us to analyse some of the qualitative material which has been pulled out and look at themes across the different jurisdictions across Australia, noting though the Royal Commissions and other inquiries, they don't gather everyone's voices, not everyone makes submissions, and they're at a certain point in time, so they don't necessarily capture a particularly, later down the track point in recovery. So there's limitations, but there's real strengths too.
No, totally, and just thank you for just to say also, it's putting it out there. A university person, it's the ethics is already there because it's already public domain. It's unpacking stuff that's buried in reports, and if it's useful, great, and if it's not, okay. And the idea came from querying the map, the idea of putting stories up. I mean, there are lots of examples of this around the world. If it's useful, great. If not, great. And we'll end just there, but it's just a final thing. That's, if we're hoping, is we want to pinch from other worlds, like querying the map, like using satire to make a point. We're proudly part of a university, of course we are, but we're going to do more sort of NGO stuff, and the Rotten Tomatoes Awards, great recovery, actually not so great recovery. We could do some scorecard thing, like you showed up from the World Humanitarian Summit. Private Eye, sorry, this is UK reference, a satirical magazine going back 60 years that has changed policies by being pointy-edged. So we're going to be doing stuff like that. HowWeSurvive actually came from an idea from an NGO that ran for many years called IPaidAbribe.com in India. Intractable, too hard box corruption. I met an honest officer. I paid a bribe. I didn't pay a bribe. A corruption hotline. We can do those things because we're very serious about systemic change. It's the systems, not the people in it, making that difference and using clever things because we're independently funded. So should we not stop the day? Let's take a break. There's some nibbly things and stuff. Thank you, panel. Thank you, everybody. We'll start again in half an hour's time for a really enjoyable debate.
So, welcome to the Life Raft component of today. We're very, very happy to not only have you here as our voting public, but also our fierce competitors for our seat on the lifeboat. So think the Titanic fighting for the last seat in the life raft, except there are no squirrely scientists on Instagram asking, could Kate and Leo have fit on the door together? The answer is no, there's one seat left. So, we have 7 very worthy contestants here who are fighting for the last remaining seat in a life raft. They'll have time to present their case for why they should be allowed to have the seat in the life raft. We have a community panel that I'm going to introduce in just a second, a community jury, if you will, who is going to keep them honest. And then you all get to vote who gets the seat in the life raft. So, let's set the scene. Something bad has happened, really bad. We don't want to go hazard specific because we know there's going to be someone in the crowd that says, actually, fires don't work that way. It's bad. It might have been an Elon Musk teamed up with James Cameron to form a new form of the Titanic in space or something, but it was bad. Now, the life raft is nearly full. The life raft has community on board. There's one seat left in the life raft, and an organisation or a function or a role gets to have it. And yes, we know that's not how life rafts normally get filled, but also no one in this room would be invited if Elon Musk and James Cameron had a collaboration, so we will just stay with the story, okay? So something bad has happened, there's one seat. To be the organisation or the function or the role that gets the seat, these people have to demonstrate their worth to community recovery. So our panel members, our debaters, have been tasked with being able to comprehensively argue the case that one, their organisational role or function understands what community-led recovery are or those approaches, and two, they're crucial to it. So I'm going to introduce our debaters as they come up each, but first I wanted to give a shout out to our community jury. Can I get you guys to stand up and turn around? We have the very excellent Ellie Bird from Resilient Lismore. We have the dashing Douglas D'Antoine, the Executive Officer from the Fitzroy River Flood Recovery. And we have Madam President Mel Blore from Resilient UKI. Now, these three are going to act as your proxy. They are going to be the people who make sure there are questions, not comments, and they're not going to let anyone get away with anything. Each of these people are going to have 5 minutes to present their case. Laura's going to give them a warning at 1 minute. And if they don't finish, I think we can all acknowledge that the most irritating sound in the universe is a kid's recorder. And I have a similar implement, and it's awful, and it's proof that my family hates me. I have twins. We got given 2 sets of these. They're bad. So, there's a couple of rules. The rules are that this is a really serious topic. Everyone in the room knows that this is a really serious topic, but because everyone in the room knows this is a serious topic, we can be a little bit light with it. So we're going to have a couple of days this week of like really full-on worthiness. This is a chance for a little bit of brevity in a very serious topic. It doesn't mean we're being dismissive. It doesn't mean we're being rude or diminishing the impacts. The second thing is that we can be hard on systems, but we are kind on people. Everyone on this panel and everyone in this room is trying their guts out to do the right thing, so we can criticise the system, but we're going to be kind to the people. So, it's going to run like this. They're going to have 5 minutes to speak. Community jury is going to quiz them for 5 minutes. We're going to go through all 7 speakers. They'll have a last chance, a final word, in case they need to retract anything, in case they need to clarify anything, in case they want to do one last sledging at someone who spoke after them, who got a really good one in. And then we're going to get Lisa and Tim up here because they're like just very trustworthy people, really just genuinely trustworthy people, and they're going to count your vote, and then that person's going to get a seat in the life raft. All right, okay. So to kick us off, we have, I'm going to refer to my notes so I make sure I go in the order that I said that I was going to go in. To kick us off, we have the Honourable Janelle Saffin, who is the Parliamentary Secretary for Disaster Recovery, and she's going to be representing elected officials. So Janelle, we have elected officials at federal, state and local levels. And I mean, politicians, man, this shouldn't be a hard sell. Everyone wants a politician on a boat. We've basically given this to you. So you have 5 minutes to reinforce the prevailing theme that politicians are the best people to have on a boat. 5 minutes.
Look, being a politician, I realise I start with a handicap, with the deficit, so I'll just put that out there. Not everyone would choose the poly to go on the boat, the last position. And the other thing I'll say is I've been in Dili, Timor-Leste all week, and I flew from Darwin about 2 a.m. this morning, so I'm a bit thought disordered, so forgive me. But look, I have a slogan that came from our community, and it's not one that I workshopped or paid a consultant to do, etc. It came from the community, and it says, Janelle gets things done. So everybody knows that. All the Janelles in my community, there's not many, but they have the posters too. They took them and they have them. They even have them, and after the flood, they even had them, people had them on their houses and things like that. So that's the first thing. So I have a reputation for getting things done. And in any disaster, for any recovery, whatever recovery it is, and ideally it should be community-centred or community-led, we know that they're frequently not. We know what doesn't work. We know they're not done as good as they should be, but you need someone who can get things done because you have to cut through. So for community to be empowered, for community to cut through, you do need someone who can get stuff done across government and also work with whoever it is in government, work with the opposition, work with all parties. That's what I do. So I also have a reputation for that. I work across the aisles in Parliament, work with everyone. When we had the big flood, Dominic Perrottet was the Premier, and I used to joke that we became besties. We never set out to be, given, you know, where we come from, our politics. We remain friends. And about 8 weeks ago, he reached out to me and said, Janelle, can I come up to Lismore for the day? And I said, sure. And we went over some old ground, he met with people, and what was very funny was someone on my side said, oh, what are you doing with Dom? And I said, we're just going around meeting people, and someone on his side, and I'll keep them both nameless, said to him, what are you doing up there with Janelle? And he said, just going around. And that's what we did. So that's important, to have a politician who not only gets things done, who can cut through, but someone who can work across the aisle. And the other thing is, we hear a lot about community-led recovery. I've read a lot, I've looked at a lot of the research, a lot of the literature. I'm still unsure exactly what it means, but I know the sentiment. And I know the power of it, and I know that's what community expects and wants. I prefer community-centred recovery, the approach to it, and we have to do a lot more work to get that right. And when I heard about the indicators today, I was thinking, in our area, there was a health and wellbeing committee set up. At one stage it had 55 people on it. I still don't know what they do, who's on it, and I'm not sure how it contributed to the health and well-being of my community, our community. So when we talk about community and a whole lot of people from community come on those bodies, it's not just always government, it is the systems that we set up, because that was part of the system that was set up. I battle every day the system, but in the best possible way and with the best people. I interact with the RA daily, I interact with community groups daily, I interact with everyone who wants a seat at the table, and frequently we say, what table? We're still looking for it sometimes. Which table will people be at? And so I'm acutely conscious of that. A few other things that I made a few notes when you were talking earlier, and I said, there's things that I know or understand, and I know what I don't know, and I think that's really important. We have to know what we don't know. I've got 1 minute. I know disasters change our lives forever, and I recognise that, and frequently that's hard for governments to recognise that. And we don't go back to what is, even though there's grief and pining to go back to what was. So I recognise that very acutely, and we have to somehow wrap our arms around community, but in a systems way, and the system has to be able to do that and adapt to it. And we haven't done it yet, but we're all grappling with it and struggling with it and trying to do that, because that's where money comes, and resources and recovery and rebuilds and, and healing and grief. I recognise very well that's part of our community, yet we often talk about reconstruction and buildings and roads and bridges, etc. And so look, there's no perfect recovery, but I want a seat on the bloody boat.
Argument there. Community jury, please. We've got a microphone for you. Ellie, you've got the microphone next to you. So if you can stand up and maybe so that the people can see you.
Okay, will do. I was just wanted to be a bit closer, Janelle, if I could, but anyway, I'm over here. So the background is that an election is just around the corner, and you need to make a decision, and you know what the right decision is, but it's not going to be popular. Which way do you go?
Look, it would depend on what it is, what the issue is, but I've often made unpopular decisions, or I've spoken out on unpopular issues, so that doesn't frighten me or worry me to do that.
Even though it may cost you votes, and it may cost you your...
I think a lot of things I do cost me votes already. So, and as the Premier said, I'm not a normal MP.
Fantastic response, I really like it. So in relation to the definition of community, and that's a really, really good thing to be able to scrutinise, because we always talk about community-led. Mm-hmm. So one of the issues is, how are you going to understand what that looks like, where you've got people that have been affected by a disaster, but then you've got these representative groups that may have been put in place that would say that that's who you need to engage?
Well, that's an everyday challenge for me right now. I've got in the Northern Rivers in particular, two distinct groups, one who say we've got to move off the floodplains, I've got another who say we've got to stay, and both of them tell me that they're community and they want community led through them. So I engage with them and I engage sort of frankly with them, and it's really interesting to define community, and the best way I can do it is think more, understand more community need and respond to community need instead of just community want and demands.
Thank you. And how do you empower community in relation to a conversation that they may not understand?
These guys are really good with their questions.
And I'm thinking of our lived experience with Northern Rivers. I haven't done that as well as I could have or should have. And my rationale, if you like, excuse has just been, I've been running for 2.5 years and I've been doing a lot of work I think that the bureaucracy should do, but that's been the nature of what's happened to us. But engaging with them, what we don't do well, what we haven't done well is communicate and provide public information, because what you're asking me, with public information that's repeated, regular, concise, clear, over and over, what I call the vomit principle, people hear it so much they want to, you know, and we haven't done that, but that's what we should do.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, Janelle, and thank you, Douglas. Now, our second speaker is Dr. Margaret Morton, who's the Executive Director of the Australian Institute for Disaster Resilience. Now, many of you in the room know Margaret. We're going to be particularly kind to Margaret today because her throat is not loving life, and yet she's still up here doing this for us. So, Margaret, you've worked for government, you've worked for the private sector, you work for not-for-profits, and now you're heading up AIDA. Why is AIDA and groups like AIDA, why do they need a seat on the boat?
So a rare disclaimer before I begin. No involvement of AI has occurred in what I'm about to read to you. And my team are completely innocent of everything I'm about to say. They have no awareness or involvement in what I'm about to do. I assume all responsibility for errors, omissions, decisions and consequences of the approach I'm taking today. I have written an ode to AIDA. I am taking the brave path, the road less travelled, to share myself and AIDA with you. I'd like you to see AIDA and me more clearly. I want to influence your hearts and your minds when you look at us and decide who will survive. We at AIDA are steadfast and determined, so let me show you what value we bring. Our knowledge, commitment and passion are worthy of inclusion. We have a vision to reduce risk, reduce harm and build resilience. We know that we are all connected and that a systems and relational view is what we most need. We know that we must work together to strengthen the connections between us. We must be open, adaptable and embrace change. We seek ways to respect history and tradition, connection to the land, the waters and the culture. We also seek to innovate, to challenge our thinking and ask questions. We are the guardians of knowledge, and I really wanted to find a raccoon costume, but I didn't. Evidence-based and practical, emergency management arrangements, floodplain management, community engagement, community recovery, animals in disasters, evacuation practices. I have a longer list written here. We produce the AGEM, sharing research, so that research informs action and practice. We strengthen skills, energise efforts, listen to lessons and share stories and experiences. So what would we bring to this journey, this fabulous life raft crew? We'd bring our knowledge of what happens in other places, of what works to support resilience. We'd bring our experience, our skills and what we have learned. perhaps we'd bring a tiny sprinkling of insight and wisdom. We'd bring our joint dedication, our drive, and our unremitting ability to work hard, to solve problems, to hold true to the vision, no matter the context, no matter the challenge. This commitment we also make, remember they don't know anything about this, the team. We bring you our whole selves. I am Granny M. We are parents, daughters, sons, sisters, brothers. We are aunts and uncles. We are friends and colleagues. We are community members, and we bring our humanity. Your task is heavy. You must choose who you need to build the future. Be strong, be brave. Make sure you choose love and kindness, courage and determination, laughter and openness. But wait, I have more than a minute. This is the scariest bit. I dedicate this final thought to my father and his love of Gilbert and Sullivan. And for anyone who's too young to know them, find an older friend if you don't know what that means. My father was one of the inspirations for my work in community building and disaster resilience, and so I give you a hint of the Pirates of Penzance. Yes. I can't sing it, my voice is not up to it. We are the very model of a modern disaster institute with information, connections, knowledge and relationships. We don't presume to tell you what kind of people that you need. We know you know your expertise and needs much better than we ever could. You understand community, you lead it, you embody it. Feel free to clap. I recommend my team to you. They're younger, brighter, stronger than me. Their youth will bring you all that I do with sustainability. I'm so proud of them and know that they are really what you need. I ask you now to give my seat to them for all eternity as they create the future with you and include new ways to live. I only ask that you proceed with kindness and with fortitude and balance both the head and heart to save all of humanity. With this in mind, I leave you now and thank you for your gravity. And don't forget that we are the very model of the Modern Disaster Institute. And there is no $50 note in here. I wish I'd thought of that, no corruption. But in case you needed anything, I give it to the panel. That's what I just read.
Oh my, controversial, controversy. Let's give a hand. I think what we are looking for is confirmation from Margaret that she will in fact record that when her voice is better. What do you reckon?
Try and sing it.
All right, Ellie.
Thank you, Margaret. I think there's a lesson in that for all panel members, which is come to community bearing gifts. So we do appreciate that in real ways. A first question from me. So can I ask, and I'm so pleased to hear love and kindness embedded in everything ADA does. So is that written into your policies and procedures?
No. Love and kindness is not written into anything procedural in ADA, but it underpins everything we do. I do hope they'll still speak to me after this. Principles do underpin what we have written, but not the practice of love and kindness.
Thank you. And so, given that love and kindness is something that communities need to navigate disasters and we can't always advocate for our own needs, how do you establish relationships with those in the sector or in government that may be able to change their policies and procedures to help us?
That is such an important question. It was a question I had thought of asking in the earlier part of the day, of how do we fill that gap to bring what we are all talking about into policy and procedure and practice and funding. I do it in lots of ways, and we as a team do it in lots of ways. You know, cups of coffee, going out to people in their own environment. We try to make sure everything we do is really inclusive. So during COVID, we all learned that you can do things online. I always try, and it's challenging online, It's challenging sitting here. I always try to make sure we project our humanity and our genuineness and our desire to make a difference. And I know the team do that naturally because we've all come together to join ADA because we really do care about the work that we do and the communities that we're ultimately here to serve and all the relationships that are necessary to make that happen. So I guess my answer is in all sorts of ways to build relationship. Small ways like cups of coffee and big ways like the conference that some of you will come to this week.
Brilliant, which is a very important way for us all to get together and build relationships. And then one more question, probably with a frame around that conference, which is that communities can't always get to that conference and the people doing the heavy lifting out there in disaster-affected communities aren't often in that space. So what can ADA do to ensure that your very important work filters down to the grassroots, beyond government, below council, into grassroots communities who are working really hard to build resilience in local ways?
Again, I think we need to do a number of things. Now, we do have sponsored places at the conference, so we make sure that people who could not otherwise
I probably
afford
need to
come.
disclose a conflict of interest. I have been the beneficiary of one of those in the past.
And by working with organisations that work with communities, we try and make sure that all of our knowledge and all of our events actually reinforces those things with those organisations. And I'm after a fabulous investor. It could be government perhaps. We would really like to transform our website to make that more accessible to anyone in the system because our website's a little bit tired. That's probably an understatement. But yeah, we're trying to do a number of different ways to make sure everyone across the system can get the same information, the same access.
Thank you.
Thanks. Let's give them both a round of applause. All right. The third person competing for a spot in the life raft is Lisa Keedle, who's come from Victoria, from Yarra Ranges Council. Now, local government, Lisa, roads, rates, rubbishes, right?
More than that.
You sure? You convince us.
Much more than that.
Convince us.
Yeah. Okay. Ahoy, everybody. Disasters might start small, but they sure know how to make a splash. And guess what? Our communities are at the centre of navigating that disaster recovery. So from my pitch for local government is that we're like a good neighbourhood shipmate. And unlike my previous speakers, we actually have an ongoing relationship with our communities. So we're connected to you from the crib through our maternal child health nurses and our immunisation programs to retirement, where we do activities with elderly residents and community activities to support them in a great third age. We even do youth activities, and we actually water the sporting ovals that your kids and your activities and dog walking happens on. And we occasionally do a weekly bin pickup. So we're part of the community before, during and after, and we think we need a seat on this lifeboat because we can help. So when recovery kicks off, sure, we're good at fixing shit up, we can do that. But we also want to tune in to what the community really needs and spotting the golden long-term opportunities over on the horizon that we're often the biggest employer also in town. So our team is basically like you're rejecting your family member to get on the life raft. When the community needs a breather, we're also here to rally the troops and help keep your things on track when you're fatigued. Think of us as another hand for your wheel, keeping your ship and your navigation steady and making sure that we stay connected. So let's roll out from local government our listening ear, cups of tea, chocolate for morale, and links to other helpful resources and maybe the connections to some of these people on this panel. We're perfectly positioned to lead and support, support community-led recovery. We'll pick up extra crew along the way, but we want to be your go-to teammate, shipmate on the lifeboat. So I'm keen not to dive in, but to join the crew. I have gifts, so I actually have corruption in mind, but with a community development lens. I have chocolate and tea.
Brutal, but fantastic. Yeah, surely there's a gift register. We'll get the HowWeSurvive gift register. If they're mini Kit Kats, it maybe doesn't. You're not on the lifeboat. Oh man, it's getting rough. It's getting rough while we're fighting. Now, Madam President, are you going to be
scoffing a Kit Kat before I hop up? No, possibly. I'm not quite sure what that question is. I'm just going to read it straight up from, which is, do the mayor and the councillors have to come on the lifeboat? Or can we pick and choose who from the council that we really want?
Great question. I think with local government, you need to understand which, and I think Janelle spoke to it before, around the value of when councillors and mayors can be your best buddies and when to not actually have them. So I reckon have them hang on the back of the rope, dragging behind, because you do need a bit of direction and ballast in a lifeboat, and that can be at the back. So yeah, I know my
maybe we could
mayor
get a
and council
tube for them to sit in.
Yeah,
Like,
correct. Yeah. So I don't know if I've answered that correctly, but I feel like I, or correctly or well. Yes, that's true. She'll love that.
And I see that you're up front with the bribes in this moment, but I'm wondering where's your source coming from? Like, have you really got the funds to back up these Kit Kats?
Personally, I have, sure. But when it comes to local government, I feel like there's a whole scale of the capability and the capacity of whether financially for local government. So yes, when we talk about disaster recovery, a lot of local governments actually end up with coordination roles or doing programs at the community level. So they seek out funding, and I think the challenge will be actually making sure the funding is actually appropriate for the needs of the community that have been impacted. So having said that, and I can't talk about every local government across the whole country, but certainly through COVID, I've seen investment in community from local governments to actually to test with ratepayers about spending and investing back into community. So yeah, there's an opportunity to actually advocate and fund for those local events.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. All right, so in a feed of false advertising, we told you that Andrew Coughlin was going to be coming from Australian Red Cross, but he's a late scratching. Instead, we have the wonderful Colin Sivalingam here in his stead. We could not be more thrilled, but what it does mean is that we have failed on our diversity quota, and we in fact have no middle-aged white men up here. And while we have thoughts and prayers that the emergency management sector will channel a pipeline to elevate these voices more quickly, we will commit to doing better ourselves. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you, Kate. Well, just listening to my previous speakers, I'm not sure who are the politicians in the room at the moment, but spoken really well. And truly, in terms of community, and today I represent the not-for-profit sector, but mainly the Australian Red Cross. And I'm going to let you know why we understand community-led approaches to recovery better than anyone else on the panel, because we are the community. And as part of our work and everything we do, we are in the community, and I know we have claims of being in community before, during, and after disasters, but what does that really mean? But in terms of our work, we are there before any disasters, and during disasters, and well after politicians and everybody else leave town, and when the media leaves town as well. But we definitely in community for a long time, and I think and we can go as far and dish out a whole lot of gifts and items after a disaster, but how far is that going to get you in terms of very temporary, short term? We can give out vouchers, we can give out kits, we can hand out some donated goods, coming close to elections, that looks very good. But let's think in the long term and of being part of the community. So, big part of our work is we see ourselves as the fabric of community. We're part of the social fabric of community every day. And that's why we believe that we know this very well, and we believe that that social fabric, that love and kindness, I know may not exist in other areas, is part of the power of humanity and really entrenched in our everyday work and being part of that community all the time. We understand psychosocial recovery, and while agencies and sectors really focus on the built environment, we are there for the people, and we normally in the center of that recovery, and focusing on the individual, and deliberately positioned in the center here. Well, hopefully you can see the picture with the center of recovery. And while most people focus here in contacting the built environment, most importantly, we're a trusted brand. When it comes to community, it's about trust, right? I'm sure we trust a lot of people during recovery, but being that trust and being part of the global brand and one of the top 3 most popular brands in the world, the Red Cross, Coca-Cola, and McDonald's, Forbes magazine, definitely rated. So to be the trusted brand and being in community with population changes, and we're seeing our population is moving and what Australian communities look like, the population dynamics, the demographics of the community. We've been there. We understand communities. There's a Red Cross in every part of the world, and every country has a Red Cross. So it means that we can leverage of exactly what community-led recovery means and looks like from anywhere. We can leverage of best practice from throughout the world and implement that locally in our communities. And yes, we'll inform the research. We definitely inform the research and best practice around that. So best research comes from practice, and we are the practice in community. Big part of our work every day is working in community, not only in disaster recovery and resilience and preparedness and so forth, but working with gender-based violence, working with the homeless communities, youth programs. We leverage all of that work that we do in community because they are our clients every day, and that means during disasters and during recovery, we know exactly what the work is and what they realize and what they need to do. It's like red dust. It gets into everything. We understand what that means in a person's life, how it gets into all parts of your life. A big part of our work is, as you think about the raft and you think about the life jacket, we are the life jacket. We have the life jackets of that community. And as you work through this and think about our resources and think about our information that we have, all the stuff is designed to support community and now and for later on. And we'll support our colleagues as well and their teams as well when they experience vicarious trauma and work in communities. I don't have all the props or anything to actually hand over, but in terms of community, anyone can hand out a life jacket, but as again, we are the life jacket of community. And unlike most, we spend significant amount of time understanding community and what community needs. We work alongside community, we don't do to community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Just following that up for, not to community, I heard that line about being the brand of the lineup, and I think that's a fair thing to say. And I wonder, is there the potential when working with community to feel the need to brand that work as your own in community?
Asking for a friend.
Yes.
Well, it depends how far you can stretch the brand, right? So, in terms of really understanding community, because also, our work, we understand very well, community wants to share the story. They want to share how they recovered. And we want to be that platform, and we want to be the voice of community. And using that brand, when we talk about our brand, we're talking being the voice of community. And I think it's a very important brand to be the voice of community.
Thank you. And another question is, how do you know you've got the correct community engagement processes in place?
Well, community engagement processes, that's where we leverage off and depend on research, and we work alongside other communities, and we work alongside other stakeholders and other sectors, and certainly we can't do this ourselves. And one of the things that we never do is go into community and think we know what their needs are. And that community is looking at what the existing engagement strategies, what works best for communities. We understand First Nations communities, we understand COL communities, we understand vulnerable communities. We work with the most vulnerable communities in our work. And the community engagement for different vulnerability groups is very different.
And one last question. How can you support community to stand on their own 2 feet?
Oh, that's the easy one, actually. Is because one thing is that working with community, we always want to make sure that the moment we start working with community, we know that it's their journey. It's that individual's journey. It's not our journey. And we'll walk alongside them and make sure that we don't leave footprints behind in our work, but make sure it's their journey and their community.
Thanks, Colin.
All right. Now, down to our last 3 speakers. So Susie George is from the Reconstruction Authority in New South Wales, representing state government. So Susie, when the Australian Constitution was set up, it was set up around post-colonial states and territories, with them having a lot of power, mandate, responsibilities and requirements. What does Australia understand that the Kiwis are missing? Like, what is that essential lens of state government that you're bringing?
Thanks, Kate. State government, you can either love or hate us at the time of a disaster, and I'm sure that many of you have an opinion, but I'll highlight today why you need us as an essential partner. Community needs government to support them in their recovery efforts. A couple of weeks ago, as part of a forum, we asked over 100 people what makes a community strong. The top words were connection and collaborate. That is what we do. We connect you to emergency management services, to essential services, to NGOs. We connect to funding, and we connect you to all other government agencies. We then asked a follow-up question: what makes a community stronger? And I was actually surprised by the answer. The key word was funding, followed by partnering. Again, that's what we do. The bottom line is all my colleagues here today wouldn't be able to do what they do without government funding. Not only do we need funding to restore the basics like roads, infrastructure, to get people back to their day-to-day life, community assets, but in the social domain, mental health support, recovery support services. The Reconstruction Authority has 4 key functions, and yes, one of those is community recovery. Our organisation exists for this reason. We have particular legislation, policies and framework to make this happen. What are some of these? Well, we have a state recovery framework that provides framework and guidance. We do pre-event planning. We work with each of the local council to make sure that we have a blueprint about what happens in those immediate steps and everyone's clear on their roles and responsibilities. We support, in many of the states we've established, community resilient networks, which our community is able to come together and give us advice and be there to assist in the first steps of recovery. So how have we, a big government agency, heard the community voice? Some most recent examples. We door knocked over 3,000 houses in a community area, in a disaster area. They gave us some feedback. gave us some feedback that the clean-up program was too short. We re-established that program. They gave us feedback that the bunting that we were using was triggering them. That was taken away. But most importantly, we had over 200 people that were connected to services for their mental health that they didn't have the courage to put their hand up or go knock on the door in the first instance. We used our legislative powers and particularly our DA powers to give a DA to a primary school. We listened to those school children who felt isolated by getting spread out across the area and in fact were getting bullied. They wanted their school, and the normal DA processes potentially were going to take over another 2 years. That school, and thank you to our parliamentary secretary, that's extra time on mine. That school will reopen in the new year. We're doing sim table exercising and big map exercising. We're out there talking to community, help them be better prepared for evacuation and understand the warning symbols. We developed a state disaster and mitigation plan, and shout out to Amanda and the team here today. While that's not about the recovery, those mitigation strategies lessen the impact of disaster, making recovery easier. And to quote someone else on the panel, better preparedness, better response, better recovery. We're here for all different parts of the disaster, from go to right at the end. Love or hate us, who would do your initial cleanup? Who would fix roads and community infrastructure, sewage, water and electricity? We provide the funds to get families, individuals, businesses on their feet. We give funding to community groups to help us with community initiatives and support localised community recovery. We give funding to different partnerships such as the Living Lab to help us in spaces that we don't have the expertise or the agility to do. Who would walk alongside you for the very long road?
The trumpet is coming out, Susie.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Susie. Yeah, definitely love in the first instance. Now let's see how we go. So, question number one, is continuous improvement something that resonates with the state?
Absolutely. And I can say, and so could my colleagues, that we haven't got everything right. And in fact, we've got a heck of a lot of things wrong. But we're listening, and there's many examples of where we're doing things differently. We've got some formal processes in place after action reviews, all sorts of lessons learned, or lessons identified. But yes, certainly acting on the community voice feedback.
So if you could talk to that just a little bit more, if we can unpack it. So how do you facilitate continuous improvement with your stakeholders, with like your peers that are in the room?
Yeah, so probably I outlined some of those in many ways. After a disaster, we would work with local recovery committees that we have that represent everything from other government agencies to different community groups to councils to give us feedback, and then those things are built into a whole range of things, whether it's pre-event plans, whether it's a new project, whether it's just how we do a policy, but certainly lots of feedback. We get lots of feedback locally, you know, maybe from parliamentary secretaries, etc., to act on as well. So absolutely building that improvement in, and I think there could be examples in all our spaces.
And communication is definitely a challenge, like all walks of life. How do you ensure us, the community, know exactly what's going on?
We've got to keep doing more of it, so I'll say that up front. I don't want to stay here and say we are perfect or we've got it right, and that's part of the continuous improvement. Everything from, we have a community leaders forum that helps us understand what the key issues are, to using community consultations. Tonight we've got one in a very small community called Burringbar to get their feedback on how we're going to use the land from the buyback properties. Also using other groups to do it. We recognise we can't do it on our own, so we get feedback back from RSSs. We've got a partnership with a couple of universities that are out doing projects, and they run a lot of community consultation. So for us, it's not on our own, but again, that word of partnering and also using other voices.
And on the basis that communication is a two-way process that we all understand, how do you ensure that you adequately receive the advice from community through their CRNs?
Yeah, so look, the feedback from the CRNs certainly gives us advice on what we should do and local community pieces, but we've gone one step more. We're doing a pilot where we've got a community subcommittee of the local LEMC where we can go from a disaster and give them feedback about what's happening, and they can tell us what we might need to do, and locally so that they can start actually planning the recovery efforts while we're still managing that disaster. Janelle uses this story better than me, but there's a bus driver in the hills of Wilson's Creek and Mullumbimby that knows more about the area and who could be cut off from access. So having his voice in a subcommittee is so important, because it's also about access and what works and how we even get to some of the places or who needs help. So we're absolutely addressing some of those ideas. And if you've got any today, please come and see me.
All right, thank you.
You need me. You need us.
Yeah.
Thank you. And shout out to the reconstruction team. We've got a number in the audience. And a bit like Margaret, the love and the kindness and the support and the passion, certainly a very dedicated team.
Thank you, State Government. All right, our penultimate life rafter today is Teresa Rockley-Hogan from the ABC Emergency Broadcasting team, and she is representing the media. So Teresa, I have two questions, and that is, we've got props. What is the role of the Fourth Estate in this? And the second question, how are you going to get your Walkley if you're not on the boat?
I don't care about a Walkley. That's not important to me. You guys all need the media. And what the ABC radio's been doing for a long time is telling stories. We're in a comfort space here. I love telling stories. Yeah, the media. We sometimes do have that reputation of leaving. Not the ABC. We're there. We're in your communities. We're in Gippsland. We're in Lismore. We're in wherever else we are. 60 locations around the country. 95% of populated Australia can hear the ABC on the radio. It's pretty good, isn't it? It's an amazing figure. I only just learnt this recently, and I'm really proud of it. As journalists and broadcasters, we do have a responsibility to report without fear or favour. We'll ask these questions of the politicians. We'll ask questions of the Reconstruction Authority, and we have been asking them, I can assure you. But it's our capacity not only as news, but as an emergency broadcaster. We never say we're the emergency broadcaster, we're your emergency broadcaster. Most of the time when I'm talking on a microphone, it sounds like this. Dim, dim, dim. ABC Emergency Information. Hi there, it's Teresa Rockley-Hogan with you, bringing you the latest information on a bushfire that's impacting insert community. What we need you to do is what the authorities are telling us to do, and that's leave now, prepare to evacuate, whatever the message is. Fortunately these days, as an emergency broadcast lead, I don't spend a lot of time on the microphone, but I help others who are spending time on the microphone. Today in Australia, there are 3 lots of emergency broadcasting underway. In Tasmania, of course, it's a devastating situation there. We've been broadcasting for days. Some of our transmitters are starting to run out of juice. That's how long they've been without power. But I just read a little email a while ago that the petrol's on the way to restore the backup generators, because it's going to be a long time before that community, many of those communities, have their power back on many levels. Power is about what communities need, and that's what the ABC can help those communities do. So when all the disaster's over, when the rain stops falling, when the smoke's cleared, The ABC is still there because we live in those communities and we're telling the stories. This is the main reason I'm holding this piece of paper, because I wanted to share this with you. I found it in my research for this day today. This is from ABC reporter Michael Vincent, who spent a week in Kinglake after Black Saturday. So we're going back 10 or 11 years. I think it's still pretty valid. He said, approaching people to speak about loss, I had a radio microphone, not an imposing TV camera. It was much easier to sit by side and ask someone if they wanted to talk, to just let the tape roll. Ask quiet questions. So what happened after that? To leave if they said they didn't want to talk. To stop if they found it too hard. Always conscious that I was a visitor. Later, someone told me, this is Michael, that their bank was insisting that their mortgage be paid. We did a story. The bank relented. That's the power that the media can bring sometimes. That's the good of the media. So the ABC's role in this life raft is to tell these stories, to give amplification to all of you, to all of your wonderful messages, your kindness, the politicians and their money and their programs, and the Red Cross and their great, great work. We want to amplify that. So if you guys want to be heard, I think the ABC needs a seat in the life raft. Thank you very much. Sorry, one more thing. I did bring my emergency backup radio with the solar, and it also has a torch that you can see in the dark. So, ABC. Yeah. Well, this is an old-fashioned one. 702's broadcasting about a bushfire this afternoon, so we could tune in and listen to that if you wanted to.
Excellent. Thank you. And good lessons in preparedness right there in your prop kit. So I might start with some thinking. So communities need good stories amongst the hardship as well. We don't just need the stories of pain and suffering. So what can the media do to ensure that we shift our narrative from victims to survivors?
I think actually the news cycle's playing into our hands a little bit here, and the ABC's been doing a bit of thinking about this, as well as University of New South Wales and the HowWeSurvive program, because people are sick of bad news. They're sick of negativity. They're tuning out. Unfortunately, they don't want to hear a lot of what we have to say sometimes, and that's tough for all of us. So what we've been thinking about is how we frame stories in a more positive way, how we tell the stories of survivors, not victims.
Thank you. And given that I was reflecting on while you were talking about, we've had our media decimated with the loss of our newspapers, and so it's very difficult for us to talk to each other. So it kind of links to this question as well, which is, how can the media help us to bridge the gap of community talking to community? Sometimes this is during emergencies when local information is really important and not just the delayed messages that are coming via official channels. So what can the media do to help us listen and hear from each other as well during recovery as well as in times of emergency?
I don't really have a good answer, except to just say that we would keep asking. I've been involved in emergency broadcasting for about 10 years now as a full-time job. Sadly, we didn't have full-time jobs in emergency broadcasting before that. But what we try to do is repeat the messages. So, initially it's about where you can get fresh water, where you can get, deodorants or disinfectants to clean houses or whatever. But then it becomes a matter of repetition and staying there. And, repeatedly asking the questions. Not so much perhaps that they vomit. I've never really heard that expression before. Yeah, no. Yeah, okay, it's before my time. That we stay there, we stay in the space. We're not afraid to ask, that we don't leave, that we don't, we keep asking our community what they need.
Right.
And let them tell it, let them tell the story.
Thank you. And last question, it's a short one. Do you have radio, big antennas and boosters so that our message can get out from the life raft back to the rest of the world?
Technology is amazing, isn't it? There's communities in Tasmania right now relying on World War II transmitters to hear their messages. That's all they've got left. So it's an evolving question and a tough one.
Thank you. Now, we have our final speaker. So we have Barmy Williamson from the National Indigenous Disaster Research Centre at Monash University, and he's going to be representing the role of researchers. So, Barmy, you might not know this about me, but I was kicked out of my undergraduate sociology course in my first year because I don't think incorrectly, but probably quite indelicately, argued that if researchers were wiped off the face of the planet, it would take the general public about a decade to realise. But if retail workers and garbage men, we would notice the next day. Convince me you need this seat. Come on, Williamson.
Thanks, Kate. From someone who who the university tried to kick out not once but twice, I hear you. Unlike my other panellists who seem to want to hide their use of AI in the development of their responses today, mine is proudly brought to you entirely by AI. Yeah. Aboriginal intelligence. So I'd like to, thank everyone for thank you, Kate, for the invitation to be on here, to be talking and bidding to get on have the final seat on the life raft. And I'd like to thank my fellow panellists for providing compelling reasons as to why they are not needed in the lifeboat. So I know some of you, I'd like to begin by considering and unpacking the word research. What is research? I feel like there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of miscommunication and old ideas about what research is and can be. I've always understood research as simply being, it's simply the business of being curious. It's about asking questions, observing, analysing, synthesising and communicating. Research simply seeks to identify commonalities and differences. And by doing so, it brings us all to a heightened understanding of, I feel, ourselves and our community and the world around us. Research is not academia. A lot of academics are researchers, but a lot of researchers are not academics. Every social group and cultural group that has ever existed has had researchers. People with a natural curiosity and a keen eye, people who learn to observe patterns and for whom the mundane matters. These people can also encode new knowledge into various forms of communication, not just books and papers, but also numbers, maps, machines, art, stories, songs, films, dances. Whatever form a researcher takes, we all need training. It isn't something one can just do. It requires years of practice, experimenting, refining, and improving. Research provides us with genuine and cunning insight. For instance, unlike my panellists, who are cuddling up to the judges over here, I know that you all are the ones who decide who gets the final seat on the lifeboat. So let me talk to all of you, the forgotten people. Why is research crucial for community-led recovery? First of all, research might begin by identifying the inherent assumptions in the questions that we ask. You know, we've already asked the question, who is community? What does community-led mean? Something that's come up in various forms today. Even the provocation of why it is important, that has a value proposition that might need a bit of unpacking. For instance, you know, a good researcher might break this question down into composite parts and rearrange them and organise them so there's a bit of sequencing to the knowledge we gain that might influence the subsequent questions we ask. You know, it's not just who is community, but where is community? When is community? That's an interesting question. What does it mean to lead? Does lead mean control? Does control mean govern? these are all different things. And unless we ask the questions, the right questions in the right order, we can miss important lessons. So whilst all of this thinking does sound exhausting and it's a lot of work, you know, it is a lot of work, but so is rebuilding a community. And I asked what the cost would be if it wasn't done right the first time. There's people in here who can talk about that. Most importantly, if we don't ask the questions and consider the nature of community, who would be disadvantaged? Probably the people who've always been disadvantaged. So bringing it back to the launch of today, you know, research can really stop how we survive from becoming how you survive. So what is the value of research? I'll finish with this note. The greatest rescue operation ever has been Apollo 13, and that mission was successful because it was led by research. A lot of people ask, as a researcher, what do you do? The answer is, it's hard to explain until it saves your life or it changes the world.
A brutal final blow. Unexpected, but wow. All right, Douglas, you're a lawyer. Come on, man.
Oh, no, we were just like, that was fantastic, wasn't it? And this, yeah, just two things like, yeah, I wasn't asked or kicked out of university back in the day. Maybe a couple of nightclubs. I met my brother. Maybe I could leave a couple of nightclubs. But yeah, just to sort of reiterate, like a big fan in relation to the work that you're doing. So for those that didn't catch it, I'm the executive officer for the Fitzroy Valley Flood Recovery Working Group. Yeah, so yeah, in Brodie, Department of Communities, and you know, through the engagement, you've just got it right. You're just nailing it. So it's fantastic. So yeah, if you don't get into this life draft, there is one out there for you. Yeah, and yeah, thank you.
What? Controversial!
We didn't have any questions. Like, oh wait, there. Oh no.
Ellie's gotcha.
Yeah. Apologies, everybody.
He was charmed into forgetting his role. You're a jury member.
Especially the AI reference, but we're not making the decision, so. So yeah, how can you help us understand ourselves in easy to understand ways? How can you do that from a community perspective?
Yeah, it's a and to bring it back to the context of this discussion, in my experience, working with community members who have been through a major catastrophic event, I think going in and asking people how they're going is a really dangerous thing to do, because common sense would suggest that they might be in a hard place, and asking questions incorrectly can confuse people and deepen what they're going through. But good questions, careful questions from people who are trained and people with the right approach can actually be really restorative and healing. It can help people come to understand what they've been through, what it means for them, and it's just kind of about holding people in those moments so that they can explore their own experiences and they can put themselves in charge of their own personal journey of recovery. So that's, one of the things just one of the possibilities that research offers in post-disaster contexts.
So on the basis, as we all know, that no two disasters are the same, they're bespoke in that regard, even in the same location. So in relation to the research that may be done from a preparedness perspective, how relevant is that when whatever it is that might follow is going to be different to what the research was based upon?
Yeah, absolutely. Really good questions. Every disaster is different, but every community is different. Every state in this country and territory is different, And yet there are common patterns that run across these events and jurisdictions and communities, which if we are trained and skilled to understand what those patterns look like, to see them occurring and unfolding, we might be able to, not just understand it, but use that knowledge in a way that's helpful, genuinely helpful for communities.
And the last question, in relation to the academics that are out there, and there's quite a few, being able to build that bridge between what it is that they may be advocating, and the community that might need assistance going forward. How do you assist in that space?
Yeah, so, and I think this is one way that research is fundamentally changing, that there always has, research is kind of understood through this, ivory towerism, and there's, that's based in experiences past and, people's understanding of academics and academics' own understanding of themselves and what their roles are. But the nature of research really is changing, it is becoming very, it's 1 minute, but they keep asking me questions, so I need to... and a lot of research, the best research, I think, is the stuff that's really deeply embedded in communities and attached and grafted onto the well-being and vitality of communities and of country, of the land as well. So I think, research is useful only insofar as it serves the people and the land.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so while I invite our community jury to come up and give their summation reports, to the Life Rafters, is there any last minute points of clarification, sledging, pleading, anything that needs to happen, or are we good? We good? All right.
I just say that we know that community recovery works best when government get out of the way, so I guess Janelle and we've got 3 people.
He spoke last. You had time as the last speaker. For community to recover, you need government dollars at least, okay?
And without government dollars, we wouldn't have research or universities.
But without the community, we wouldn't have government dollars.
We're also, probably one point is we're also there for the whole journey, not just a one-off piece.
Well, can I just say that every day in the world, we got individuals that are recovering from disasters, and we know individual recovery leads to community recovery, right? And we got communities across the world where none of us are actually there. None of our services are there, but community is leading the way in their recovery, and we can be that little bit prompts on us. I think some of us are more there than others, but definitely this recovery is taking place across the world, across the community.
I do think you should pay some attention to creativity. We've had a lot of talking at. I just want to do a little bit of a plug for creativity. The future would be a sad place without artists.
All right. We good? All right. Community jury, who wants to go first?
Oh, I can, if I may, and it was just like 3 general observations, and I can only talk to like the Kimberley and in relation to the work that I've done in relation to that Aboriginal engagement. And the first part is to get the engagement right by way of structure within the Aboriginal space. Yeah, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Yeah, definitely. And the second one is in relation to like honesty. Like even if it's not a good story that you have to tell, like just say it. Yeah, and because a lot of the times like people are sort of hidden behind, something they should have addressed. Yeah, and the consequence of that, is quite profound. Yeah, and the other one is relationships. Yeah, it's interesting what you see nationally in relation to the Voice and the Uluru and the Makarrata and things like that. But if you can develop, a relationship with somebody, as we all know, that holds you in good stead, whether it's an individual or an organisation. So hopefully that helps the room regarding your decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Some compelling arguments. But the first thing I want to say is there's no room for any of you. Just throw me all of your bags and we'll get on with it ourselves. Especially the ones that are full of money.
But I like it.
Look, thank you. The thing that's really interesting to me as we have this conversation is, and I'm not really sure why we're shifting the narrative from community-led to community-centred. I don't understand it, because for me, having lived through the epicentre of one of the worst disasters this country's ever seen, I wholeheartedly know that we need self-determined communities who can step in, lead and deliver their own initiatives and their own recovery activities. I did a quick reminding myself of what the principles of disaster recovery are before I came in today. I was like, I wonder if those still ring true, and they do, because it's about community-led in complex, difficult environments where we need to communicate, we need feedback loops so that communities understand the decisions that are being made. We have opportunities to talk at, but we don't often get opportunities to hear. And in this space, I'm talking on behalf of my community that feels very frustrated with not understanding why and how different decisions are being made. I really understand the challenge of doing that well. But I think that the challenge ahead of all of us, and it would determine it would determine who I would let on the life raft, is what skills, abilities and resources are you going to give us to build our own capacity, lead our own recoveries and build ourselves up to be the best possible people we can be so that we can move forward with agency.
Here, sister. So community is very relationship based. We don't work on a transactional system. We work on having a relationship with each other. Social capital might be called. So when I look at all these fine individuals representing all these fine, what are they, organisations, roles or functions.
I like your term. What do you call it?
The benevolent machine. Yeah. Collectively, the benevolent machine. I have to tell community that all the time when they're bagging you out to me. I say, no, it's all right. They're the benevolent machine. They've got a difficult job to do and they're very busy getting their ducks in a row. That's what I say to them. But if it comes down to it, when we're looking at who we're going to put in the lifeboat, we're going to take our friends, aren't we, first, really? And of all the people that are here, the people that have come to my community and had a conversation and gone, how are you going? Where are you up to? How can we help you? Are the academics, are the researchers. They're the only ones out of this whole selection of humans that have come to my specific community and related to us that we have a relationship with. So I'm just putting an extra plug in for them. Not that they needed an extra one. And also when you're considering your decision, just to back up what Ellie has said, it's not the bucket of money or the how-to guide for that, is up for at a quite high level, or the policies or procedures or any of those things. It's actually how are these individuals and their groups they represent literally assisting community to be enabled. So I'm not into community-led and I'm not into community-centred. As far as I'm concerned, there will never be enough money and there will never be enough people. Red Cross, love you. There will never be enough money and there will never be enough people to fill the gaping hole that is getting bigger and bigger all the time. And what community really need is to be enabled to do that work themselves. That's it, thanks.
All right. Now I'm gonna call up Tim and Lisa to do the count. So the deal is you all get one vote each, so none of this squirrely, oh, but I like two. I don't care. You only get to choose one. And I don't know, maybe I should throw a caveat in there. We'll give them a life jacket if they don't get on the boat. You'll get a life jacket. So we're going to go in the order that we said it. The politicians. Who's voting for Janelle? Oh, the count. Three, all right. I'm going to get my pen. All right. Margaret, is Ada getting a seat? All right. I think at this point, our biased sample starts becoming apparent. Local government, Lisa Keatle. Is local government getting a seat? Local government currently sitting at 4 times the number of politicians and twice Ada. Red Cross, who's voting for Collins? Colin getting a seat. We have more Red Cross people in the room than we have hands up at the moment. This is brutal. Whoa. 7. Sorry. State government, Susie getting a seat. Right. The Fourth Estate, who's getting ABC? Who's giving ABC their vote? Huh? Yeah, you can vote. You can vote. You can vote. And Biami, where researchers getting the vote. All right, hang on. Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. Put your hands down if you are not a researcher. Yeah, that's what I thought. Your desperate quest for precedence in grant writing opportunities betrays you, my friends. No, it's fair and square. I think we saw who won. So thank you, everyone. We'll give everyone a round of applause. Now, to be sensible here for just a second, I think what these sort of presentations show us is that we all need to work well. Not just well together, but well. We all have different roles to play. We all have different levers that we can pull. We all have different barriers that we're facing. We all have different boundaries in our role. But together, and I don't want to sound too Pollyanna about it, but together is the only way we get to be exceptional. Using all of those skills there is the only way we get to be exceptional. So I'd like this sort of to be looking at the types of people we have in the room, the types of people we're going to talk to this week, the types of people you're going to talk to when you go back to your homes, your communities, your organisations. We don't have any reason that we can't be exceptional. If you look at all the skills, all the different resources, all the different networks that we have, so let's be exceptional. I'm going to hand over to David to wrap up, but just while he's coming up here, we do have a small prize for all of you, irrespective of your seat, but congratulations, Barnum.
Well, it's my happy role to say lots of thank yous, and I think we should really... It's a pretty tough job to put yourselves out there. I'm not sure I'd do it. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for the panel. Let's say thank you again. And I think we should say thanks to Kate for being exceptional when it comes to presenting and topping and tailing that. And this is my personal highlight of saying thank you, and that's to Natalie. Nat, can you come up? I know you don't like this, but there it is. So, Natalie is our project manager for HowWeSurvive. She joined us from the private sector with all these different talents and experiences. I'm going to really embarrass you because we've not met you yet today. I know you do. And the venue, the everything, the detail, the stuff, the last minutes, the everything else, the fact that this has just been fabulous is 100% down to you. So thank you very much, really. So please visit our website, HowWeSurvive.com, and please come visit us at the AFAC conference. We're on Resilience Lane, excuse me. So we'll be there, and we've got free beers and bits and bobs, and please come for a natter and a chat. And thank you, and please sign up to the website, and thank you for giving a few hours of your lives today. I hope it was enjoyable. But thank you. We're done.